In less than 5 days, Nigeria will, on May 29, 2023, have a new leadership that will steer the affairs of the country in the next 4 years. President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu, during his campaign, said, if elected, his administration will be committed to mobilizing all assets within its power in securing the country. His campaign promise on national security comes at a time when Nigerians are in dire need of finding solutions to the multiple internal security challenges in all the political zones of the country, which includes insurgency and terrorism, banditry and kidnapping, pipeline vandalism and massive oil theft, as well as killings and violent separatist agitations. However, Tinubu has vowed to source and deploy modern tools that will help to adequately tackle the threats of terrorism, kidnapping, separatism, banditry, cybercrimes, and economic sabotage. Also, Tinubu's administration will have to devise ingenious ways to manage the thousands of insurgents who voluntarily surrendered to military authorities, as well as support the thousands of displaced people returning to their homes, especially in the Northeast, after years of exile. As we take a look at Nigeria's journey to May 29 and the security challenge before the new administration, Arise News security and defense correspondent Ferdinand Duroha reports.
Security of lives and property are the main function of government. No meaningful development or progress can be achieved in any society that's lacking peace and stability. This is the reason why government must place a premium and show total commitment to safeguarding lives and properties of its citizens. Nigeria has had its shares of conflicts, with the climax being the Civil War from 1967 to 1970. But 5 decades since the war ended, many will argue that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has experienced the most trying times. This point of view is anchored on the argument that the administration experienced the peak of the Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast, banditry in the northwest and north central, clashes between herders and farmers in north central, and the secessionist activities in the southeast. The consequences are the thousands of killings of innocent citizens and members of the armed forces, thousands of people kidnapped, abducted, and also displaced from ancestral homes, billions of funds in naira and hard currencies paid as ransoms, and not to forget the loss of livelihoods. Despite these challenges, the administration of President Buhari is counting its gains in the fight against insecurity. It scores itself high on delivering the promise to combat insecurity bedeviling the country. The Buhari team says since 2015, the narrative has changed positively as a result of the visionary leadership of the president, who is a former military general. According to them, since the inception of the administration, there have been steady progress in building the capacities and capabilities of the armed forces, with resultant impact on all the operations across the country. The administration says it has been able to end devastating attacks like the bombing of the UN building in August 2011, several streets and market bombings, and the kidnap of 276 Chibok girls in 2014. The 4 platforms on which the government bases its achievements are groundbreaking policies, unprecedented acquisition of platforms, recruitment and capacity development of personnel. In a scorecard of President Muhammadu Buhari presented by the Ministry of Defense in February 2023, it lists the following as its achievements: degradation of insurgency, improved internal security, projection of air power, reformation and restructuring of the armed forces, acquisition of more than 38 aircraft and reactivation of many others, increased recruitment into the armed forces, establishment of training institutions, acquisition of more than 2,000 units of various armed fighting vehicles and equipment, improving combat readiness of troops, recapturing lost territories and cities from insurgents, procurement of over 415 platforms of various types and mix for the Nigerian Navy, fleet recapitalization of the Navy, detection and arrest of illegal vessels, ending pirate attacks on Nigerian waters and the Gulf of Guinea, protection of offshore assets, and launching of Delsat-1. It also lists the following policies as initiated and implemented: revised Nigerian National Defense Policy 2017, reform of the Ministry of Defense, establishment of military industrial complex in 2015, the establishment of the Defense Industry Association of Nigeria, National Maritime Strategy and Implementation Plan, establishment of the National Hydrographic Agency Act 2021, and Gender Policy for Armed Forces of Nigeria 2022. The administration also speaks highly of its interventions on the Nigeria Police Force. It says this was done by increasing the number of police personnel by over 20,000, procurement of operational vehicles, equipment and weapons and accoutrement for the police force, and instituting several police reform policies. Despite these successes, reforms and policies, critics say much more could have been done and achieved within the administration's tenure and the funds expended for the purposes. They refer to the inability of the government to rescue more than 90 of the kidnapped Chibok schoolgirls and hundreds of others still in captivity. This was a criticism against the previous administration and a subject of campaign during the 2015 elections. Huge ransoms paid by federal, state governments and even private individuals to rescue kidnapped victims. Several attacks on correctional facilities with hundreds of inmates still on the loose. Increasing accounts of killings in the southeast. Frequent attacks in the north central and northwest linked to farmer-herder clashes. It is for this purpose that critics are calling on the incoming administration of Asiwaju Bola Tinubu to do better. They say the incoming APC administration must carry the burden of strengthening whatever gains made by the previous government and accept the failures with a bid to quickly end all forms of insecurity so as to give way for economic development. This is also in tandem with the promises of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In an 80-page document containing multi-sectoral policy options tagged Renewed Hope 2023 and unveiled as part of its manifesto, the former Lagos State Governor says he will prioritize national security. He affirms that security is the bedrock of a prosperous and democratic society, while promising to make it a fundamental responsibility to protect the lives and property of its citizens. He says this will be achieved by mobilizing the country's national security, military and law enforcement assets to protect all Nigerians from danger and from the fear of danger. To achieve this, Tinubu promises in his action plan to further equip the armed forces with more modern hardware and needed technological support. He also says police will be reformed to fully take responsibility for internal security. The plan intends to free police personnel from extraneous duties, such as VIP security and guard duties. It also commits to transferring fully VIP security and provision of security for government buildings, installations, and other critical assets to the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. This comes with a promise to evaluate the NSCDC and reform it to be better integrated with other internal security apparatus. Other plans by the incoming administration are to bolster Nigeria's security forces by recruitment and training. While these promises are laudable, analysts say the devil is in the details and its implementation. Some of its criticisms are that there is a need for a new national security policy that will detail the new reforms and its modalities. They have also pointed to biased or loop-sided appointments of security chiefs who oversee the armed forces and security agencies. The argument is that more importance is attached to selecting people on quota system or individual bias and not competence. Many have also raised the question of will and motivations to make the right decisions. They argue that although President Muhammadu Buhari was a former general in the Nigerian military, he could not end the war against insurgency. In all, some of the nation's biggest challenges, including food security, increasing numbers of out-of-school children, gender-based violence, unemployment, and lack of purchasing power, can be solved by ending insecurity. The outgoing administration is also bowing out with members of the armed forces involved in theater operations across all geopolitical zones of the country, showing the widespread impact of insecurity in the country. It is therefore imperative that the new government hits the ground running immediately, builds on existing achievements, and wins the war against insecurity. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
Joining us now on this show from our Abuja studio to discuss Tinubu's national security agenda for Nigeria is Brigadier General Sani Kukasheka Usman, former Director of Army Relations. Good morning, General, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on your program.
Okay. The main subject is a security agenda for the next administration. But let's start with the outgoing administration. The Buhari administration, as our report indicated, has been saying, oh, so much has been done in a list of achievements of the administration. But this morning, we had Governor Samuel Ortom on this program, and he was very skeptical about the security achievements of the administration. If you were to assess the Buhari administration, outgoing, what would you say about what that government has been able to do about national security in the face of the various challenges, terrorism, banditry, insurgency, kidnapping, and continuing crisis in parts of the country?
Well, like I said, thank you very much for having me on your program. Really, it is a mixture of such, but whenever you are going to make assertion in respect of, how far the government has fared in terms of security, you should also look at where were we when they took over. And that will be talking about way back 2014 and 2015. And when you are talking about that, the main security challenges as of that time was basically terrorism and, of course, insurgency. We have had instances, the terrorists, particularly Boko Haram terrorists, were holding on to some territories of this country. And right here in Abuja, there is no symbol of democracy or security that has not been desecrated. To look at the United Nations building, Mogadishu Cantonment, the police headquarters, and of course, FR Plaza, talk less of public facilities like the Nyanya, and of course, nearby Niger State, the Madala. And you look at the number of checkpoints within Abuja, almost everywhere you go. But that is no more. But not just Abuja, even in the Northeast itself, life is beginning to come back to normal. But of course, given the security challenges, they keep on mutating, and now we have terrorism and banditry and kidnapping. But even that in the northwestern part of the country, as compared to those days, things are getting better. So invariably, I think there is a serious improvement, and they have fared fairly well, but there is still room for improvement. Take, for instance, the issue here is the issue of whole society approach to security challenges. And unfortunately, in most instances, is more or less like kinetic. Kinetic in the sense that you always put boots on the ground when some of the security challenges are rooted in some of the socio-economic problems that we have in a given society. And unless you have that and address that, then of course the issue of justice, then you will still be having the problems you are having. Therefore, dealing with security challenges is supposed to be all-encompassing and comprehensive, involving all segments of the Nigerian society. It is not just the issue of using the security forces only. There are also other mechanisms that ought to be. And if you are even talking about that, we are talking about 3 tiers of government. 2 of them are working, 1 is not working. And it takes a collective responsibility of the 3 tiers of government to ensure security. Because now, most of these security challenges emanate from local, communities. Take, for instance, whatever bandits that are operating, they must have been in a particular state, a particular local government, and in most instances, in a particular community, especially in the southeast and other parts of the country. So these are the issues that we need to address, the issue of constructive engagement. Of course, having the number of the troops really helped. And of course, there are so many development in the security sector, but much need to be done to ensure a secure and more safe Nigeria as it is.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I know you've talked about just giving us an idea, a snapshot of the challenges that have plagued this administration. Rightly said, in the Northeast, we've seen terrorism, even though the president has said that he's degraded largely Boko Haram, but we have still seen some of the emergence in that area. In the Northwest, we talk about banditry. In the South, we talk about, agitations from secessionist groups and the likes. And so, and of course, kidnapping and other kind of insecurity issues. Looking forward, the Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, or his tenure, or his campaign promises was that he was going to prioritize security and deploy all means necessary. He'd looked at welfare, he looked at training needs, he looked at adopting technology as some of his plans. But from your own perspective as an expert in this field, what areas should he focus on in terms of priority in, let's say, the next 6 months? Because the issue of security came up very strongly during campaigns, and each of the political candidates or the aspirants had spoken about their plans for tackling insecurity in Nigeria. What should he get to work doing immediately?
Well, as you know, it is no surprise that, security has always been in the front burner simply because of its importance in national development. It is only when a society is secure you can be able to think of other things. Otherwise, when you are facing existential threat, you will have difficulty in even focusing on the mundane things about life. Therefore, it is not surprising, and of course, we give kudos to them for that. However, as you know, we in this country, we are experiencing some security challenges. So it is very important that such security challenges are neutralized and dealt with. Take, for instance, the banditry, the kidnapping, the other security challenges. How do you prioritize to ensure that these issues are resolved? Now, I was talking about whole society approach. Most of the issues, most of the, most of the approach that time was more or less kinetic. Now you have to think of the whole society approach. And thankfully, this administration has started on that note, so we need to improve on that by involving the community, in issues of security challenges, especially where there are perceived grievances. And beyond that, again, we have to also improve the intelligence gathering capabilities of the security forces by involving the community, and make sure that beyond even involving them, that there are also socio-economic, policies that will enhance the well-being of the Nigerian society so that they can be able to contribute meaningfully. Then, of course, you have to create an enabling environment for qualitative education and constructive engagement of our youth so that they can be properly engaged. Then you look at the issue of border security, because we have issues of proliferation of weapons into this country, and in fact some of the criminal activities are transborder. So therefore you have to enhance border security, but of course you cannot enhance border security without active collaboration with our neighbors and of course regional groups. But most importantly is to take advantage of this wonderful assets we have in this country, the human resources that God has blessed us with. To what extent are you looking at, you are involving the various segments of the Nigerian society in terms of security of this country, in terms of, intelligence gathering? And apart from that also, how do you make the average Nigerian to understand and trust the security forces? But of course, you have to also embark on reforms on the security sector. But by this, I'm talking about improving professionalism, equipment, training, and of course, enhancing, the relationship between the security forces and the Nigerian society, so that we will be working hand in glove with each other, so that some of the security challenges, before they even manifest, they will be nipped in the bud.
Well, General, President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu was said as much as the things you have said, while talking about security, either during the campaigns or during his meetings with northern leaders. And he made the point that he would deploy all modern tools. You have been in the security zone your entire career. What are those modern tools that you would deploy? And he stressed recruitment, welfare, and training, and how he will give agbado to these, security people to make them committed. Having had significant experience with the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. But he says it is a function of resources. Where would those resources come from? Particularly now that the country has a debt overhang that everyone is anxious about. But first, let's start with modern tools and resources.
We all know where the resources are coming from, because we have a monolithic economy. But that notwithstanding, that is why the issue of prioritizing comes into play. Take, for instance, the innovative way Lagos State government come up with that trust fund that enhance security. So we have to think outside the box to see to what extent are we going to, fund our security. Take, for instance, for the past decade or thereabout, Nigeria has not had the luxury or the wherewithal to be involved in peacekeeping operation. Apart from contributing to world peace and security, it is also a revenue generating, venture. Some other countries, especially when Nigeria was one of the best, I think the third largest troop contribution country to the United Nations peacekeeping operation. It generates revenue. And these are some of the things. And apart from that, there are other, ways that we can be able to fund our security forces in the sense that there are multinational companies, taxations and what have you. But most importantly, the fund that we are talking about, like we have the police trust fund and what have you. I think this and money more will enhance the funding of the security sector. And going back to the issue of technology you are talking about, these days science and technology plays a very important role in dealing with security challenges. And why is it so? There are certain innovations that instead of, amassing troops, a single equipment can do the job. Take, for instance, the unmanned area vehicles and what have you. And these are the things that we need to invest heavily. But it is not just enough to invest. We have to enhance the capacity of our security forces to be able to handle and effectively utilize these, technological weapons, so to speak. So it is all encompassing. While you are dealing with this issue, at the same time, you have to be dealing with other issues. Take, for instance, empowering, the youth and enhancing the socio-economic well-being of the Nigerian society. They go hand in glove, so that you can have a better and more secure society. So it is not just enough to concentrate on one aspect. You have to also think of other aspects and also the role of the Nigerian society in dealing with security. Take, for instance, for whatever reason, our traditional rulers, they have always been there, but they play a very important role. And unfortunately, the Constitution did not even recognize such roles. I think it's about time when we are amending some of the legal frameworks of some of these issues, we take that into cognizance. And apart from that, there are other organizations, various professional groupings. To what extent are you involved in the Nigerian Union of Road Transport Workers, the youth groups, and the women groups? To what extent are you involving them in, fashioning out security strategies, the issue of, community policing and what have you? So these are the building ingredients to enhance, security in this country. You talk about security, technology, you talk about equipment, you talk about welfare, you talk about professionalism, but at the same time, the person that is being secure, you also have to involve him or her so that it will be a kind of well-coordinated, synergized society.
All right. Brigadier General, I'd like to talk about the police. There are multi-layers when we talk about security, and we look at the army, but also the police, because in the introduction, we talked about internal security. And one of the plans of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is to strengthen the police to be able to tackle and handle internal security as opposed to having to lean on the military to maintain peace and order internally. He hopes to do this, according to his manifesto, by welfare packages. And again, just tying it back to the issue of money and funding, where this would come from and how realistic this would be, or perhaps some recommendations for him. He talks about welfare of the police. He talks about training of the police. He talks about recruitment, further recruitment in the police force. How do you think this will materialize? Because, as has been said, the devil is in the details. It's not just about making promises, because his predecessors have made promises similar to this, but unfortunately have not been able to fulfill these promises. Is this realistic? Would we see this change during the next administration? Would the police as an institution be strengthened and empowered to handle internal security?
I think it's just a matter of political will, and I'm very, very optimistic because already the building blocks are there. For instance, there are so many, commission in terms of police reforms, talk of MD Yusuf Damadami and so on, about 6 of them. I think question of revisit, it is about time to revisit it. All these, recommendations and see to what extent you can give flesh to them, just like you mentioned about the details. And apart from that, also, you look at, there is no country that is in this world that is not having any a form of policing system or the other. There are certain countries that they do not even have armed forces, but even the Vatican has a police. So I think the starting point, if we want to ensure a well-secured society, is to reform our policing system by looking at even the legal framework of the policing system, because there are overlapping mandates. What is the relationship between the Police Service Commission, the police headquarters, the Ministry of Police Affairs, and so on? Then the police council, that is one. Secondly, unless we look at also the equipping, the training, and the welfare of an average police officer, will have a problem. Take, for instance, now, by United Nations, I think it is supposed to be a policeman to 400 people. But I can tell you, we have less than half a million in a population of 200 million. Half a million policemen in a population of 200 million Nigerians. Let's even assume 50 millions are not within this country. We have just 150 million, residing, including, others, foreigners staying in this country. You know that the number is grossly inadequate. But it is not even that. The modern day criminal is so sophisticated. To what extent have you trained and equipped the policing system in this country to be able to deal with the criminal activities of the 21st century? So these are the issues. And if you even go back, I always ask, within the last 20, 21 years that we have been experiencing democratic governance, to what extent have we invested in our policing system? If you check the numbers, they are grossly inadequate. Therefore, that is the starting point. And beyond that again, it is question of following through the details. It is not just enough you allocate resources. You have to make sure that the resources allocated go down the ladder and are judiciously accounted for. And it goes to the people that need it. Take, for instance, if you say that you are allocating, let's say, 3 trillion to the Nigerian police, to what extent an average police outpost is getting? I mean, how much is it getting out of that? What are the sub-aids for it? Is it in terms of stationery, in terms of welfare, or is it in terms of other equipment, or in terms of training? So these are the issues that we have to. But beyond that, again, we have to condition the Nigerian society to understand that the police need our support, need our understanding, need our cooperations. And we cannot do that without proper enlightenment and proper education to understand that we are in a better position more than anyone else to solve Nigerian security challenges. And we can do it if we put our hands together by, enhancing the capacity of the various components. So it is not just the policing system itself, but the whole Nigerian society. To what extent are you enlightening them whenever they see security issues and they report, and it will be responded to,
We have just a few minutes to go. 2 quick things. The major issue, in my view, about the police is the conversation around the idea of state police. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in the course of his campaigns, said, oh, state police is a constitutional matter, that his administration will look into it. Should we have state police? And secondly, ahead of the inauguration on Monday, we're told that security agencies are beginning to comb hideouts and arrest potential thugs. Don't people have the right, one way or the other, to be part of the process? As a security man, who is a thug? I mean, what do they mean by hideouts, raiding hideouts and all of that? Just those two things quickly.
I didn't get the first part, but the definition of a thug, I don't speak for them. Every Nigerian has a right to be part of this, historic occasion, transition from one government to another. I think what they have to do is to up their game by, they know the black spots and all the rest. And of course, anybody who has dubious intents will definitely have no business having there. But as an average Nigerian who is interested in peace and development of this country, and I think it's good that we should be able to participate in the transition program, especially, the handing and taking over between the outgoing president or outgoing government to the incoming government. I didn't get the other first part properly. I wish you can reiterate it so that I can address it also.
Police. Should we have a state police?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yes, of course, the issue of state police is contentious issues. I could remember way back 2018 when we were at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, when we interrogated the internal security framework of this country. Part of the recommendations actually were the issue of decentralizing the policing system. But eventually, we had to look at other argument given the context of the Nigerian society. And the argument is simple, that, look, given the antecedents or given the way the state governors are behaving, if you empower them more with police, state police will have problem. But it is not even that issue. You made reference to the issue of resources. And we have had instances where state governments are owing workers almost 3 to 8 months' salaries. So imagine a situation where they were unable to fund their policing system, and yet these guys are armed. You can understand the implication of it. So these are some of the fears. But I think as time goes on, I think what we should have done is to look at all this ad hoc arrangement that we have and see to what extent we can enhance them. Because various states, they have one form of, policing system or the other. But what needs to be done, just like has been done in other countries that we know, is to integrate them within the policing system, and they have a reporting system. Like I know for sure, the community policing system in Ghana is working perfectly well because there is synergy between the main Ghana police and the community police, and in fact they integrate them into the policing system. And I think that is what we should be doing, and we should have that kind of trust among ourselves for us to do the right thing. But I think we need the starting point is to harmonize the existing structure and integrate them with the policing system, and let them be accountable, respect human rights, and be professional also.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Brigadier General Sani Kukasheka Usman, former Director, Army Public Relations.